The SiteShed podcast is made possible because of Tradie Web Guys, creators of beautiful websites designed specifically for tradies and contractors. If you're tired of dealing with web designers that have no idea about your industry, then head across to tradiewebguys.com.au and reach out. Like many companies from all over the place, you'll be very glad you did. This is episode 101 of the SiteShed podcast. My name is Matt Jones, and you're joining us today for part one of the How to Grow Your Business with Online Marketing series with Will from Growth Labz. This episode is called Why You Need to Be Marketing Online, and make sure you tune into this podcast because Will has thrown out a pretty attractive call to action to you listeners out there. So you're going to have to tune in to find out what that is.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Will Wang, welcome to the microphone on the SiteShed.
Well, thanks, Matt. Awesome to be here.
Mate, good to have you. So we recently met at an event in Sydney and hit it off, both Northern Beaches local boys, and we're going to be doing a bit of work together for the listeners out there. I've invited Will on the show today because he's a marketing guru, and we're going to be talking about some things that, well, it's kind of selfish, I suppose. I want to learn this stuff myself, so I've roped Will into coming on the show to talk about it. Will, I've got to say I'm pretty impressed so far with our relationship and how it's gone, I suppose, to date. And what I really want to, I know there's a lot of our listeners out there that are in similar scenarios where they're at that stage where they may need to implement some sort of marketing strategy into their business to help them get better results. As you know, we build online websites and stuff like that for trade-based organizations. However, very often the next step is, okay, well then how do I get my phone to ring a little bit more? So just wanted to bring you on the show here to sort of, I suppose, talk a little bit about what we've spoken about personally. And I know you've done a lot of work with trade organizations, both locally and abroad in the past. So I'd just love to get a bit of your experience there, and maybe you can employ a bit of knowledge into our listeners. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no problems, man. Look, yeah, it has been fun, hasn't it? So it's been really good fun talking about websites and online. And I think that there's, one thing that I've noticed with tradies as well, it's we do a lot of industries and we help a lot of industries, but we particularly like helping tradies because that's kind of where my background has been. So my family actually owns and operates our own kitchen building company. So, I've kind of grown up around tradies and, we couldn't find a nicer bunch of people to help. So, mate, glad we're talking about this. Hopefully the guys listening can get a lot from it.
So in true fashion, as you're probably aware with the SiteShed podcast, we typically try not to over communicate we try not to communicate more than one topic per episode. So what we typically do, as we're doing in this instance, is we're taking this series and we're breaking it into 3 separate episodes, and we've collaborated on this. And I'd just like you to maybe talk to the listeners a little bit about the topics that you've chosen and why you've chosen them.
Yeah, sure. So that's a great idea. The things I want to talk about is I wanted to talk about why tradies should be marketing online and why they really need to be moving some of their marketing budget into the online space. And the reason for that is, traditional marketing hasn't really been working. And I want to dive into a little bit more about the results that they can see, what they can expect when they actually start trying to do this stuff. So that's the first episode. And obviously, once they understand why they should be marketing online, it would be good to get some kind of idea of what they need to do to start seeing success. So the second episode, we're going to be talking about the 3 key pillars to actually getting results in your online marketing. And once we've done that, I wanted to get some creative juices running and share some campaigns that we've run for tradies in the past that have really worked well. So I'm going to be diving into tried and tested online marketing campaigns for tradies and contractors.
Wow, that's awesome. So just for the listeners out there, all of this information is going to be also available through downloads. So Will's actually offered to give us this documentation through the SiteShed. So you'll be able to head across to the siteshed.com/resources where you'll see a link to the content that Will's being left behind. So you'll be able to actually get in there and get hold of that physically. So that's awesome. Thanks very much for that, Will.
Yeah, pleasure.
Will, what are some of the problems or some of the typical pain points that organizations may have when they come to you initially?
Yeah, so the biggest problem that we're finding at the moment is, tradies have been marketing in a very similar way for a long time. So whether that's putting ads in local newspapers and getting featured in magazines. Now, the thing is that the trade industry or the print industry has been slowly dying, but the amount that you're paying it could be still the same. So for example, I was talking to a kitchen building company recently, and they invested about $5,000 to $10,000 in every issue of the magazine that they go in. And in the same magazine, there's about 50 other business owners doing the same thing. So it's starting to become really crowded. Marketing starting to become way more competitive. And what used to work before just isn't working now.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? I mean, I'm a firm believer as well of, there's not, I've been saying this for quite a while. There's not necessarily a right or wrong when it comes to marketing. It's more a matter of, I suppose, throwing a whole bunch of things up against the wall and seeing what sticks. Obviously, over the years, people have been, have used things like local paper and, or newspapers and all those other avenues, maybe trade magazines or whatever it is. Not necessarily they're wrong, but I suppose what we were going to do today is maybe talk a little bit more about some of the trends in relation to the digital space and some of the online marketing tactics.
Yeah, look, absolutely. If you, there's the way that I kind of look at it is, if you've got something working in marketing, I mean, I did say that print is kind of slowly dying off, but if it's still working for you and if you're still getting results, well, there's no need to just cut and run right now just because, it might not be working in the future. With marketing, it's always changing, just like a trade business, right? There's always trends coming through and there's always new things that are working. And we always have to look at our businesses and think about how we can do things better.
Yeah. And I think another thing that's important to realize as well is, a lot of these, who is your target market? Like, who is your customer? There's a lot of our listeners out there that, may be dealing with people that are of slightly older demographic and maybe they're not on Facebook or maybe they don't, maybe they still look for tradespeople through their local paper and things like that. So, I mean, there's, as you say, it's forever changing. And I think it's important to be receptive of the different vehicles that are available. So then you can choose which is the right one for you, or then you can better still, maybe not even choose, just trial and test and see what's working, what's going to work better for you.
Yeah, exactly. Look, with marketing, if something's working and if you're getting a return from that, well, there's no reason to cut it. What you can do is get the returns from one avenue and kind of start exploring others, just to make sure that as you grow, you've got different avenues that you can go down if you want to grow your business aggressively.
Yep. So, Will, I suppose, why don't we just jump into episode 1 here, and we're going to be talking about why you need to be marketing online. I mean, obviously, this is something that's pretty close to me and my audience. They're all pretty savvy in that regard. Why have you decided to talk about this, I suppose, as the staple for this series, as episode 1?
Well, I think with online, tradies have kind of gradually started to realize that the going online is actually a viable way to grow their business. And even if they haven't started to realize, I'm sure that they're getting spammed every single day with people trying to sell them things like SEO. And so the general public and the general and trading population, they're starting to realize that maybe it is more viable to jump online. But at the same time, there's case studies or there's companies spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying to market online and they haven't got a single client. So that's why I thought, it's kind of important to talk about, first of all, why they should be looking at online marketing. And at the same time, look at, well, if we are going to be doing it, how do we do it smart so that we don't waste thousands of dollars and get nothing back from it?
Yeah, that's a big thing, isn't it? I mean, there's so many charlats in this industry, in the online industry, and there's all these people trying to sell you all these magical, golden pill sort of solutions. It was funny. I only got an email last week about, and the title of the email, I actually went ahead and screenshot it and posted it to social media because it was just hilarious. But it was something about the title was how to trick Google. How you can trick Google into getting rankings. And I think this is the big problem, isn't it? Like, people sort of see these, it's like a bit of a shiny object syndrome. They think, oh, wow, there's a way we can sort of get around doing all the hard work. But the reality is it's not about getting around the hard work. It's about doing things right and making sure that you're not there to try and trick Google. Like, you're there to work with Google. At the end of the day, Google wants your customers to get the best results. They want your customer to find the information that they're looking for. And they want those people to find it on your website or wherever it is. So you've both got the same goal in mind at the end of the day. People just have this, I don't know, this thing in their head where they want to go around and just try and take shortcuts all the time. It's like the diet pill,
Yeah, exactly. Look, with all marketing, so the way that we boil it down is people get too stuck on the platforms that they should be on. So it's the worry about, should I be doing SEO? Should I be on Google? Should I be doing Facebook ads? But ultimately, what it really boils down to is, who are you trying to help? What are you going to help them with? And how do you get the message across to them in regards to your services and your products? So we complicate things sometimes, but it doesn't have to be. Really, all we're trying to do is to get our services in front of the people that we love helping and that we actually want to help, and get them to take an action to engage us to actually provide the service.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about, I suppose, the decline in print marketing over, the last, 10, 15 years or so. Are there any trends out there that you know of, or that you might have handy that, I suppose, dictate the growing disinterest in that regard?
Yeah, so it kind of really depends on what sources you're actually getting these trends from. The most common one that I often quote is, over the past 10 years, the revenue in print marketing has been in decline for about 40%. Now, that could mean several things, right? It could mean that print marketing is becoming cheaper, although in the trade market, that might not necessarily be the case. But it could just be that less people are reading it, so less advertisers are actually using print. Now, what that means is, it's not entirely dead. So obviously, as you were saying before, if you serve an older demographic, well, chances are they're still picking up the local newspaper, they're still flicking through it every single day, and they will still pick up your services from there. That being said, the younger audience coming through, or the people that you want to be serving for the next 20 to 30 years, you've got to ask yourself, how are they looking for my services now? And it's not necessarily on print. I'd imagine they don't even go to Yellow Pages. I'd imagine they just do Google searches or essentially look at information on things like Facebook.
Yeah. And one of the things that we find now, I mean, this is something that we promote religiously. It's so important it doesn't really matter what you do these days. If you're running an ad in the paper, if you're doing a letterbox drop, if you're driving down the street with your vehicle that's got your logo branded on the side of the door, if you're walking down the street with your uniform, anything like that, we're firm believers that at the end of the day, everything will drive back to your website. Like, people are going to, if they see an ad in the paper, especially like someone in their Gen Y or whatever it is, like, people are more inclined these days to jump on their phone and look for you through that URL or Google your business name or whatever it is, than actually call the number on the ad. So it's really important, I suppose, and we preach this a lot, considering the whole ecosystem, like understanding how everything works together. Yeah, you can go ahead and you can do a letterbox drop, but then how does that affect your traffic coming back to the website? Or if you want to run a Google ad or you want to run a Facebook ad, how does that affect traffic coming back to the website? And how is the traffic, once they get there, how is it converting? So I think it's really important for listeners to understand that we're not just talking today about Facebook marketing or online marketing in general. We're really talking about one of the core elements in that whole ecosystem that is your modern day business.
Yeah, that is an absolutely essential point. So many people focus on external platforms like a Google, like a Facebook, but really when it boils down to it, you have to think about what the end goal or what the end result is. And that's for someone to either call you or someone to send you an email or somehow reach out to you to say, hey, I'm interested. Can you help me? So we find that it definitely does come back to your website. And if your website hasn't been set up correctly, well, then there's no real point looking at all this other stuff because you're just wasting your money and kind of throwing money down the drain, really.
And we get this a lot. We get people calling in all the time, and they call in with the question. Well, I suppose the inquiry: I need more traffic. I need more leads. But when we actually dive a little bit deeper, it's very, very often not more leads they need. It's improving the conversions of the traffic they're actually already getting. So what people sometimes neglect to recognize is if you're getting, say, 100 people back to your website and you're converting at 1%, that's one sale. But if you can increase that conversion to 2%, that's 100% improvement on what it was, which means you're saving money on your marketing and you're getting twice the results.
Yeah, exactly. And look, it's something that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper in the second episode of the series.
Yeah.
But when we do marketing, we really advocate using what we call a landing page. And so just some stats around the website. Typically, if you're running marketing straight back to your homepage, which I know about 80 to 90% of people do when they first start marketing, the conversion rate of a click to a lead, so that's someone who raises their hand and either calls you or leaves the details with you, from someone clicking on your ad to someone leaving you their details, if that goes through on your website or your homepage, it's only between 0 to 2%, so not a lot at all. But if your homepage is done correctly, or if you use tailor-made landing pages, that could be as high as 10 to 20%.
Yeah, wow.
So for the same amount of traffic, for the same amount of money that you paid in your marketing, instead of getting one client, you might actually end up getting 10 to 20 clients.
And so just for the listeners out there that may not be familiar with the terminology around landing pages, what a landing page basically, or why don't you tell them what a landing page is, Will?
Yeah, sure. So landing page it's a web page that sits on your website domain. And the easiest way to explain it is a landing page is a page that gives the person visiting the page one of two options. And the first option is to become a lead, or the second option is just to leave the page. So what you find is typically, and Matt, you'll be the specialist in this kind of area, but on a homepage, there's a lot of different options. They can go through and read the blog. They can look at contact forms, your services. But a landing page doesn't allow people to do that. So it really focuses them in on one or two options, which is become a lead or just bounce off the page.
Yep. So to make it relevant, I suppose, to our listeners out there, an example of a landing page may be if you were if you were, say, a builder and you wanted to run a promotion on decks and pergolas, you would build a specific page off the back of your website, which may be XYZ building / decks and pergolas. And then it would basically have content on that page that is only relevant to that service and that promotion that you're running. And when a visitor lands on that page, and they could get there through a number of different avenues, they could get there through a Facebook advertisement they've seen, or it could be a Google advertisement they've seen, or it could even be a letterbox drop with the URL on there, something like that. When people basically get to that page, they have the option there where they can either click to get more information, by which way they're contacting you, or they can leave. But there's no real way of getting back to the website where there's the full navigation. Is that pretty much what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
It is. Essentially just focuses them and make sure they don't get distracted by everything else going on.
So it's important, I think, for the listeners to understand, and we've preached this a lot in the past, when you're trying to run promotions or you're trying to market a product or a service, it's really important that you're driving people back to a page where they're getting specific information about that promotion they've seen. The reason we do that is because, as Will just alluded to, if you're going to drive people from an advertisement they've seen in Google, which is talking about home renovations or a special on hot water heaters, if they've seen that ad and they've clicked on it and then they are being sent back to your homepage, it means once they get to your homepage, they've then got to go looking for this product or the service that they've just seen in the advertisement, which is what they call a bad user experience. So ideally, you want to be sending the people that have seen that ad directly to the page that is directly relevant to the content that they've seen in that advertisement.
Yep, nailed it.
Nailed it. All right. What else do you want to talk about here? Why we need to be marketing online? What about platforms? What about the different options out there in the online space?
Yeah, sure. So just before we jump into the platforms, there's just one thing that I wanted to talk about that kind of make things, it would give them, would give your listeners a great understanding of where we're coming from with marketing online. So I wanted to talk about the breakdown of market segments. So what I mean by that is typically when we go through into marketing, what we're doing is we're trying to appeal to people who are already looking for our services. Now, I'll include this. I'll include this pyramid as a bit of a download in the resource guide too. But typically, what you find in any kind of market, 3% of people and only 3% are actively looking for what we do. So that means that if you're a plumber and you've got Google Ads, the only people responding to that are the people who are already actively looking for plumbing services. Now, the way that we like to market is we like to target more than the 3%. So what we find is that on top of the 3% already looking, 7% of the market are open to using your services, but they're not really looking for it. But if you get some kind of information or some kind of offer in front of them, they'd actively take you up on that offer. Now, on top of that, you've got 30% who don't know that they need your services. And again, it's great to market to those people because you're the only one that they're looking at in that case. And a further 30% that think they don't need your services, but you know they really do. And the last 30% who would never buy from you no matter what. Either they just don't have the money, they don't care, or they just don't like your business for one reason or another. So it's important to understand that, as part of a good marketing campaign, we can't just target the top 3%. We should be looking at a bigger cut of the market.
Okay, interesting. Funny you've just run through that. I literally came off a webinar this morning. They were talking about those exact figures to the percent. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different types of platforms.
Yep, so the two platforms that we mainly operate in when we do campaigns for tradies are Google Ads and also Facebook Ads. So between the two, there's a little bit of a difference in that Google Ads are people kind of who are already looking for your services. So they're more tailored at the 3% or the top 10% of the market who potentially, could very quickly come on board and say, yes, I'm definitely needing someone like you. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. Let's get things rolling. So if you want leads and clients to come through quickly, Google's a great way to do that.
We find a lot of emergency services get the best results from those ads that you were talking about on Google. Would that be your experience?
Yeah, it would be. So with the emergency services, I wouldn't recommend going to Facebook for that. Definitely Google is the best place because that's when someone has a broken toilet or their plumbing isn't working. And they just jump straight into Google and type emergency plumber. If you're doing an ad and you're in the top 3, well, chances are you're definitely going to get a call, right?
Yep.
So the other side of that, though, is Google, it depends on your service because some kitchen, we've done, obviously, with our own business, we're on Google, we're on Facebook. You can use Google for a long-term marketing play as well. And what I mean by that is if someone's looking for a brand new kitchen, they're not going to immediately pull the trigger and go, yep, I'm going to give you $50,000. Let's do it tomorrow.
Right.
So if you're a tradie that does bigger kind of jobs, so say, for example, granny flats, or if you do home renovations, Google definitely can still work, but you need a process behind that to nurture your leads and to keep talking to them and to keep top of mind so that when they are ready to pull the trigger, you're the first person they think of.
We find sometimes as well for some of those services that good content strategy. I mean, again, I suppose it comes back into play with the ecosystem that we're speaking about. But yeah, like sometimes a good content strategy can serve quite well in that space.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Now, so talking about content, when you go into a platform like Facebook, that is definitely more content driven. So for example, Facebook works well to kind of engage the market that aren't actively looking for your services. Just as an example, there was a campaign on Facebook recently done by a carpet cleaning a business based in the US. And what they found was that it's always hard to get in front of mind for people looking to clean the carpets because people only look at that once a year, maybe once every couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But the question was, how do we drive more sales on a platform like Facebook and get more people coming through more often? So they created a really clever content strategy that talked about, well, here's the types of dust mites, germs, and bacteria that lives in your carpet. And here's why it's not good for the health of you and your family and, and your kids and your dogs and your pets, things like that. So they had a real content-driven aspect of the marketing, and the Facebook ads they ran really just took off based on the information they were providing.
Mm-hmm.
So Facebook is a really clever way of engaging more than the 3% who are actively looking. And if you've got good content, I'd definitely go there.
Are we going to dive into, in any of these series, anything to do with the targeting associated with Facebook marketing, or is this going to be a separate episode?
Yeah, look, so that's a whole different can of worms that we're going to open up, because the amount of options we've got in targeting, it really does get quite creepy.
Yeah.
So Facebook does get a bit stalkerish, and we can talk through we can touch on some of the options we've got in targeting, but that might be another separate episode where we go really deep into getting an actual campaign up and running.
Well, better still, why don't we throw it out there to the listeners? If anyone out there wants to hear a bit of a case study about, I suppose, a service and a location that's relevant to them, comment in the show notes or leave us a comment on iTunes, and then we will get in contact with you, and we'll basically put together a bit of a case study where we can sit down and we can actually go through some of the analytics. Like, you'll be amazed at how deep you can go with Facebook analytics. And as Will said, it is kind of creepy, but it's a pretty massive topic. So maybe we won't touch on it right now, but we'll come back to that.
Hey, you know what, Matt? I think we might even be able to do one better.
Oh, really?
So if someone wants to, so if one of your listeners wants to volunteer their business, maybe we can even take their business and go through and mock build a campaign just for them. And by doing that, we can dive really deep into, the kind of targeting options that they need to look at, being a local tradie, and even go into some of the copy that we can write for the ad as well.
Wow. That's a pretty big offer out there, guys, if you heard that. So Will's basically offered to build out a Facebook campaign for you. I'm going to put a caveat on that. You must have left us a 5-star iTunes review. Otherwise, you're not getting it.
Yeah, bribing your listeners. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Okay. That's amazing. All right. What about these other platforms, Will? What about things like, I mean, you see it all the time now. You can advertise on Instagram. You can advertise on Pinterest. You can advertise on LinkedIn, blah, 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 blah. Like, what's the go?
Yeah. So look, we're testing those all the time. So within my agency, I mean, we've got ads running on all different platforms. And I think things like Instagram, Pinterest, at the moment, we're finding that it's a little bit immature still. So we wouldn't recommend diving into that until you've got the Google nailed, until you've got the Facebook ads down pat. There's just too much. There literally is 1,000 platforms that you could be advertising on. What I tend to suggest is focus on the core 2 or 3 that will really bring most of the results, because otherwise you're just going to spread yourself thin and none of your campaigns are going to work.
What about the other search engines? So Bing or Yahoo or all these other ones? Yandex?
All these random ones that look, we have done some stuff on Bing, but I think the stats are like 80% of all search traffic goes through Google.
I think it's more in Australia, actually. I think it's more like 90%.
Yeah, 90%. So the way we look at it is what marketing essentially is we're going where the attention of our clients are. So if the attention of our clients aren't on Bing, but it's 80 to 90% on Google, why would we look at another advertising platform until we can maximize the one that will work best?
Yeah, I think in different markets, like I know in the US, I think Bing actually occupies considerably more, something like 20% or it's worth advertising
Yeah.
on anyway, because Microsoft's got a bit more of a hold on the market over there. But yeah, in Australia, it's pretty much Google or nothing.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny that you said it, because in the US, what we found with some of our US clients is advertising on Bing can actually be a little bit cheaper than advertising on Google. But it all comes back to where are you going to convert your clients? So, so Bing might be cheaper, but the campaigns or the people that use Bing are a very different market to the people who use something like Google. So, it does go on a case-by-case basis, and it does really depend on how you've got your campaign structured.
Well, let's get to closing this episode up. Is there anything you wanted to add there?
I think we've covered everything for episode 1. I'm keen to dive into episode 2 and 3 and break out some
awesome.
more.
Well, mate, thanks for that. Bit of a takeaway for me there is obviously, as Will said before, as a bit of a framework, if you're going to be running ads or you're going to be running specific campaigns or whatever it is, drive those ads back to a specific landing page. So get them back to a page that's talking about that product specifically. And then once your visitors arrive there, make sure they've got a way, you've got a way for them to, I suppose, move on that offer. That's probably my key takeaway there. Okie dokie. Well, let's wrap up this episode. That was part 1 of the How to Grow Your Business with Online Marketing series. That was called Why You Need to Be Marketing Online. And we're going to be coming back in the following episode, and Will is going to be talking us through the 3 key pillars to online marketing success. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a cracker. Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to the siteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from the show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.